All right, so this is the agenda for today. So thank you everyone for attending. Very simple agenda today. Um, let's see, feel free to chime in. I can't see you and or see the chat box, and so feel free to just interrupt me if needed, but this is going to be the agenda for today's webinar. Let's see.
Kimberly, I see that Cecilia has her hand raised.
Oh, okay, Cecilia.
Hi, it's Gabriella
Oh,
with
hey,
Hi, and we're together right now.
I know what.
Hello,
That's amazing.
I know, right? So we just wanted to check in. I feel like there was an email that said, like, please don't miss this meeting. But we are in the middle of training with Latino Network here in Bend, in Redmond. And so if it's being recorded, is it okay if we watch,
Yes,
both watch it later?
Yes, I got the email.
Okay?
Yep, I got the email. Yes, yes. There's a couple of grantees that has, yep, totally fine.
Okay.
There's a couple of grantees that have already emailed me noting that you'll be missing, and that's why it's recorded in case anyone misses it. So yeah,
Okay,
well, good to see you two together.
We're like, we're on a little break. Let's check in before, and then
Yeah.
it's recorded. We'll watch it later.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, glad to see you two together. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, wait a minute. Connecting the dots.
We're excited to be together with both teams.
Excited.
Right now we're training our team here, so we're just excited to be with them.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, have fun.
Bye. Bye.
All right. With Lorelai, thank you for nudging me and letting me know about that. Let's see, if you haven't already done so, please put in the chat box your name and what agency you're from. I've given PSC the permission to be co-host, and so definitely go ahead and take the screen.
Kimberly, do you want to take care of your business items first to make sure that we do get to those, or are you not worried about it? I'm just afraid of overrunning.
No, my business item are very short.
Okay. Okay.
Very short.
Yeah. Cool. I just wanted to be sure. Mm-hmm. All right. So let me share my screen. And make it work. Excellent. So thank you, Kimberly, and thank you for making this time for us today. We are actually hoping to use the majority of the meeting to bring you up to speed on what the evaluation leadership, your colleagues, have been working on over the past several months. We've got some pretty exciting updates to share. And also we wanted to use this time to formally invite all of you to join in and participate in this next phase of the design process that we're entering. So that is what we'll be talking about today. So since May of this year, approximately the past 4 months, the ELG has been working on drafting 2 evaluation tools for our shared evaluation. So a parent-family outcome tool and also a parent-family satisfaction tool. And development of these tools was guided on a fundamental level by these 4 research questions that we identified some time ago, and I think had also shared with this group. And just as a reminder, those are the 4 here. What are ESEF program benefits for parents and caregivers? What are ESEF program benefits for families? How are families and children experiencing ESEF programs? Are they satisfied? And to what extent are families defining and meeting their own goals in the course of participating in ESEF programs? And in thinking about those research questions, the group also identified these basic content areas that we would want to be looking at and gathering data to speak to. So parenting confidence, parenting knowledge, parent and family well-being, empowerment, connection to culture and language, sense of cultural pride, and then again, as I mentioned, satisfaction with services. So we wanted to give you, tell you a story about the process that we have gone through over the past 4 months in coming up with these draft tools. So we can kind of bring you along the little journey that we have been on. So the first step that we The first step in this process was really to take a look at some of the tools that grantees are already using and to really engage with the potential pros and cons of just going with one of these existing tools. So we spent a good amount of time in reflection and discussion, looking over these tools and thinking, will these really suit our purposes for this evaluation? And the group ended up deciding that it would actually prefer to go with creating a new tool. And the hope was that in creating a new tool, we might be able to come up with a tool that was really felt more relevant, more respectful, and more empowering than most of the tools that we were able to find that are already out there. So that was a big decision. That was like a turning point for us in our process. We also talked about, in thinking about creating a new tool, like in an ideal world, what are the characteristics of those tools? What would we want them to look like? So we identified these key criteria. We would want the tools to be brief and easy to complete. We would probably be looking at a combination of survey style and open-ended questions. We would want the tool to be completed by the parent, caregiver, identified family member, but also, if they desired, with support from program staff. We would want the tools to be customizable by program so that there would be options to really make the tool fit your program, not just necessarily be the same standardized across everyone. Really agreed we wanted the tools to be affirming and culturally responsive. And then, of course, available in multiple language versions. So whatever languages would reflect the communities that were served. So that was kind of like our baseline criteria that we set for creating the tool. Okay, so where are we now? Based on all of those conversations leading up to this point, PSU drafted some possible items for review and revision by the leadership group. So then the leadership group, in turn, shared back those drafts with their own home organizations for additional review for a broader range of perspectives and roles in the organization. So to date, we have already gathered and incorporated some really great feedback from that process, and that will continue over the next couple months. Actually, we have it planned through the end of this calendar year. So we have all agreed in the leadership group that a top priority for us is really taking the time to do this right? To get the input and the feedback that we really need, knowing that it will help grow the tool stronger and stronger. So that's been a real kind of guiding principle for us throughout this process. So today we are here because we want to open it up and expand it out to all of the grantees, to all of you. Likewise, inviting you to take a look at these draft tools, share back with your organizations, and make suggested changes that you think are needed to the tools as well. So recognizing that we don't actually have this much time today and that none of you have yet seen these tools, we really just wanted to treat this as an opportunity to introduce you to them. So again, just wanting everyone to understand that we have several months planned out for this process. This is just like a kickoff. This is like, hey, meet the tools, but then take the next few months to really sit with them and engage with them so that we can continue to improve on them, if that makes sense. So in terms of a process for the meeting, what we thought might make sense would be to first walk through the tools, which I can do in just a minute, and then give everybody just like 10 minutes on their own to review the tools and start to think about some initial reactions and thoughts about the tools. Then maybe break up into small groups and have some conversation. Like, so what's rising to the top? What are folks liking? What concerns might they have? And then come back for another 10 minutes of just kind of informal share out in the large group. So that's kind of what we have envisioned for the day. Again, knowing that after this meeting, the hope is that you will take all of this back to your organizations to really engage in a more thorough process. Before I jump into the tools themselves, though, I did want to just remind everybody, as we are reminding ourselves all the time on the leadership group, that the part that we're talking about today is just the outcome study. And as a matter of fact, it's just the parent and family component of the outcome study. There's also a child level component, but we're not there yet. We haven't done that work yet. When we do, just like now, we will bring it back to share out with all of you. But the other half of the evaluation is the process study. And this is the part that is really based on more qualitative data. So stories, the interviews that we did with all of you around culturally specific services, hearing about folks' experiences with implementation, etc. So PSU is in the process alongside this outcome study design process of collecting that data from all of the grantees. And for that piece of it, we are looking at this other set of questions, right? That's outlined here in this slide. So what makes culturally specific early childhood education unique? What makes it so important? Trying to get a better understanding of the system level barriers and changes that are needed to support racial and linguistic equity in early childhood education. And then the big picture contextual factors that are influencing families, communities, and programs so that we can really present a rounded out full picture to the legislature rather than just some numbers, right? We're really trying to move away from just the numbers. The other reminder is just around this intentional flexibility that we have attempted to build into these draft tools. And this was another one of these kind of foundational principles that we decided as the leadership group was really important to carry forward. So again, in the spirit of the Equity Fund and of being culturally responsive, really needing to make sure that there is that responsiveness built into the tools. So we're aiming for a core set of questions with the option to make changes to the wording, right? If that makes more sense for your community, make changes to the wording, keeping the meaning, but saying it in a way that actually is going to make sense to folks. Skipping questions maybe that don't apply or really just that don't feel like a good fit culturally. Maybe adding supplemental questions that do feel important to your particular program or community. So those are some of the options we have been talking about. Also talking about like when people use these tools may be different across programs. There's a lot of variability in what you all are doing. So some folks may elect to have it be data collection at the beginning of the program and at the end. And other programs, it might make more sense to just be at the end. We've heard from some programs that already collect data at several points throughout the year. So that might make sense to them. So in thinking about these tools, again, it's just keeping in mind that they are designed to flex with all of that variation. Okay, so last slide before actually diving into the drafts. We have been playing around with some different kinds of response scales, trying to move away from just kind of your conventional numerical scale. You know, how you always have a scale of like 1 to 5. How do you feel, you know, rate this or that? There is increasing evidence that those numerical scales actually don't work very well for a lot of people. They're not necessarily understood that well. And maybe the data is not as reliable when we just rely on the numerical scales. And some increasing evidence that something like an emoji scale is actually a lot more intuitive and meaningful for a lot of folks. So we've got 2 examples here that we've been kind of playing around with. One is the emoji scale, and then the other one is this idea of moving from an empty glass to a full glass. And we're thinking that we might need a combination of both, because the emoji scale really speaks more to like emotion and isn't necessarily relevant to every type of question that we might want to ask. So just keeping these scales in mind, I did not, as you'll see, paste them in here because we would have had like 100 slides to go through if I pasted a scale in after every question. So just imagine in your mind that this is, each one of these questions will be followed by one of those scales. That's the idea anyway. So we'll be interested to hear from everybody what you think of those scales, if they seem like they might work for your community or not, and if there are other suggestions. This is all very much, again, in the development phase. So any and all input is most welcome. So the first set of questions that we have drafted are around parenting knowledge or confidence. That was one of the domains that the leadership group identified. And I'm not going to read through all of these with you. I think Alexis was going to put the actual tools in the chat. So you should be able to pull them up yourself and read along. And then, as I said, we'll have that time, that 10 minutes to also just quietly look at them yourself. But as you can see here, knowledge and confidence are the dimension that we're trying to get at with these questions. The actual title at the top, parenting knowledge / confidence, would not appear in the tool itself. That's just to guide us in the development process. So parents or staff would not actually see that. Then the second set of questions is around this area of parent and caregiver empowerment. So we've got 6 questions here that we drafted to try to get at that dimension. Then we have a set of 4 questions around parent caregiver well-being. And I just want to note these 4 have been, I would think, some of the most challenging for the group to think about how to draft in a way that might be meaningful across communities. So would especially appreciate folks' help in thinking about these and how they're phrased and if there's something that might work better. Then we also have this core set of really important questions around cultural pride and connection to community. And then we go on to the next tool. So just to be clear, we've actually drafted 2 tools. So this would be a separate tool that parents and caregivers were asked to fill out after completing services. And this is like basic, well, it's not very basic. The idea of getting feedback from parents and caregivers is basic, but I think that the questions that we've drafted here are kind of unusual in some ways, not necessarily your standard satisfaction questions that you typically see. And that's what we're trying to do, right? So we're trying to get at what might be different about culturally specific and culturally responsive services that would then be reflected in parent and caregiver experiences of the program. So that's what these questions are kind of designed to get at, if that makes sense. We also wanted to be sure to include in the satisfaction tool the option to move away from those response scales, the emojis, whether it's the glass, I want to say half full, but that's not right. The glass that's filling up, to just allowing parents to write in how it is, the feedback that they would like to provide on the program. Writing as much as they want or as little as they want. And again, this would be an opportunity for staff to also provide support if that would be helpful. So those are the 2 tools. What we were hoping in taking time to review on your own, and then when we break out into small groups, if you could just think about how these drafts are sitting with you, knowing that you're just seeing them for the first time. What do you like? What concerns do you have about using the tool? In particular, are there areas that you think that we could cut? That was another one of our sort of foundational principles in thinking about designing these tools, was really wanting to keep them as short as possible so that it didn't put a big burden on families or staff. to participate in data collection. So we want it to be meaningful, but we also don't want it to be pages and pages of questions, right? And then overall thinking, what seems most important to keep in order to demonstrate the unique impacts that you all are having doing culturally specific services. Like, in order to demonstrate to others why it's so important to have this particular funding stream, it seems valuable to include questions that speak directly to that. So it's kind of bringing that lens in the back of your mind when looking at all of these questions. And that's all I have to present until we come back. So I'll stop sharing. And then Kimberly, I think we were just gonna take sort of the 10 minutes and then rejoin after that and move into small group breakout. But let me pause for a second and just see if there are questions that I can respond to right off the bat.
I had a question, Marla. So when we do these, gonna be like a survey, how many times a year are expected for us to do the survey?
Right, so that's a great question, Shauna. The idea is that we would work with each one of the programs to figure out with you all what makes sense for your program. So it might be different from program to program.
Okay.
I see Jeffrey's hand
So,
up.
I just like to remind folks of one piece of information that was passed over, and that is that no program is actually going to be required to use this tool. This is a tool to help us. I think the evaluators and the equity fund would like it if programs all use the tool, but there's not a requirement that we use these tools.
Yeah, that's so important. Thank you, Jeff. Oh, I think I see a hand raised. Muna?
Yeah, I have a question. So with the data that we collect, does that say with like the agencies, or will that be sent to ELD for like a part of collection that's gonna go to?
Right. It will be submitted actually to PSU, and then we do the data analysis and write up the findings and then submit that to the ELD. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
So does that mean, I'm sorry, follow-up question. Does that mean it's gonna be all done online then for each family that we work with?
Well, again, it really depends on what you think will work for your program. The idea is that we're going to spend time talking with each one of you to figure out what process would make sense and would be the least burdensome.
Got it. Thank you.
You bet. Well, maybe we should take that 10 minutes to do some review and then come back together and split up into some breakout rooms. Cool, thanks.
Let's see, it's what, 10:28, basically 10:30. Let's come back at 10:40. So please use this time right now to look through the tools and see how you're feeling about it and be ready to kind of share in the little small groups, okay?
Yeah, so I think we were just hoping that folks would maybe share out some takeaways that came out of your small group discussions. If there were any questions that folks wanted to bring forward or feedback, kind of initial reactions to the tools.
This is Angela Fasana, and I am new to the group. Just a second. But we did have some things in our breakout. So I think first and foremost, we kind of read through it, and if I was to take this and put it out in our tribal environment here with the tribe, I would make it look a little more tribal friendly for us. So it would say more like our tribal children and things like that in it. So it doesn't look like I'm taking a mainstream evaluation tool and farming it out just for the purpose of the grant, but that I would really want that feedback. And so I'm going to have to plug in language that makes our tribal people see themselves in the document. And then some of the other feedback I thought that our group had talked about was simplifying some of the words. So things like environment is a big word. There was talk about how some of these concepts would be hard to translate in a non-offensive way in other languages. So thinking about that. And then especially the first section, we all had a little trouble with like parent guilt that I felt like it was going to create. So if you're saying, I treat my child with love and respect, like who's going to answer that question, especially if somebody's reading that and says, they're not going to answer that question. So maybe totally honestly, and so instead of a lot of I's that's in this, I know, I treat, I work, I provide, maybe saying my child is treated with love and respect. That also accommodates, I felt like this was very mainstream nuclear family. And a lot of our families are not. Their kids are being raised by aunties, uncles, grandparents, and foster parents. And so this looked very nuclear family to us, my child. It also referenced a lot of possession over children, which is very counter to our culture in terms of they're not possessions. And so that kind of goes back to some more colonial concepts that are a little tough for us to chew on. So I would have changed a lot of that language in there as well. So my child lives in a safe and stable home or community, rather than all the things that I'm supposed to do as a parent and create that parent guilt. So just that was the feedback. Is anybody else from the group, did I miss anything?
Zakia, I don't know if Zakia wants to kind of touch a little bit on like how the evaluation is very Eurocentric, and even I represent the African American community, and we did touch on a little bit about like how it's just not really culturally responsive to the communities that we serve, the African American and African American. So I don't know if there's going to be any changes to that also.
That's all exactly the kind of feedback that we're looking for. So any and all suggestions for how to change it so that it actually would better reflect the communities, that's why we're here today. These drafts are by no means written in stone. They really are just like a starting point. And what they're largely reacting to are the requirements for the evaluation that were in the legislation. So it's like we're walking this funny line where we're trying to meet those requirements and be culturally responsive at the same time. So it's going to be tricky, right?
Yes, definitely keep this coming. This is what this is for. We want to be able to hear all the voices, see what will work. We know every community, every community is different. We respond differently, and so we want to hear more. I would say there's no cookie cutter mold in how we are supposed to get this evaluation for everyone, and so we want to hear it. This is why it's so important, especially this is under the equity fund evaluation, for us to do it the right way, and so we are here for that reason.
Our group, we agree with Angela and her group about how that I treat my child with love and respect. It would be tough for a parent to answer no to that, even if that's how they actually felt. So I thought we thought that question was troublesome. The second thing was 2 questions to us. Felt essentially asking the same thing. It was 16 and 17. I have ups and downs, but mostly feel okay. And I can usually manage my stress or worries pretty well. So maybe joining those 2 and wording them differently, but essentially as like, I'm managing, I'm managing, I'm okay. Yes, struggle a little bit. There, essentially, we feel it was asking the same thing. And I think that was it for us.
Just looking at my notes, we also had the concern that the question about having a sense of purpose could be a trigger for some parents. So I'll just add that. And thank you, Jessica.
Sorry, Jeff and Angela, I forgot to ask it, if you wanted to add anything. Thank you.
So our group talked mostly about the parent outcome tool. We didn't have enough time to go into the other one. But most of us said that it would be great to be able to do this like a before and after, to be able to give us like where they come from and then where they are after our programs. And I had mentioned that maybe like if we could alter it to what emojis would be culture specific to whatever group that we are serving, would make more sense. And maybe having it like as a Google document for any virtual type classes so that it'd be easy to pull over as a report. But the actual questions seem to be really good and kind of aligned with what most of us do. Some of the others said that they work with a lot of families that don't read. So they felt that it would be a really great way to have conversations and maybe use it as a conversational tool because they would read it with them, explain what the numbers would mean, and then help them fill it out. And so it would be great for home visiting too.
That accessibility piece is very important. So good points on that.
Si alguien del grupo de español quiere hablar sobre nuestra discusión, lo puedo traducir en inglés. Y si no, está bien también.
Yo puedo mencionar algo. Estuvimos hablando sobre la presentación del documento que va a ayudar a diferentes aprendizajes de estilo con la comunidad.
¿Puedes decir esto otra vez? Perdón,
No, está bien. Estuvimos revisando las dos presentaciones, los dos documentos, y la visualización va a ayudar a las diferentes comunidades que tenemos.
Gracias. Yadira said that we looked at both documents and we thought that the emoji visualization will be pretty helpful for the Latino community, and specifically the emoji scale.
También estuvimos conversando acerca de las necesidades, no solamente en el lenguaje español, sino en otros idiomas o también en las personas que no pueden o no saben leer.
We also talked about the importance of having the tool translated to languages that are needed for the communities, as well as how we're going to address doing these tools with folks who can't read.
estuvimos hablando sobre la segunda parte de uno de los documentos, que fueron las preguntas abiertas, cómo para nuestra comunidad funciona más las preguntas abiertas dentro del mismo salón de clases, en conjunto con los padres.
We also talked about the importance of the open-ended questions and how maybe we can add a more some questions there because our community really, likes sharing stories and data through open-ended questions.
No sé si me faltó más información al resto de mis compañeras.
Gracias, Andrea.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of how a program could modify the tools for their own purposes and for their community. So you could feel free to add questions onto the end if that made sense.
I did have a question on how these are going to be used within our grant. To be like, would we be scanning them and like sending them over as part of our like end of the year reports so that you guys actually could use it? Or is it going to be where we'd have to enter them all like on smart sheets for you guys to collect the data? Because if we have a lot of open-ended questions, that would be a lot of data entry if you guys are expecting that from all of the grantees.
Shauna, we're not expecting you to do data entry. So it would be submitting the forms to PSU and PSU would do data entry.
Okay, perfect.
Can I tag on to that question though? Though you guys aren't expecting us to do data, if we wanted to have it like in our own personal data, we were fine to upload that to like the client's file information. That's okay.
Say that again, Brandy.
So we have an internal data system and there's like a feature that you can upload documents for each participant. So we would be okay to keep this info, like keep a copy.
Yes, totally.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And one of the things that we're thinking about, and this is a little bit down the road, but we are thinking about it now as a team in terms of making your data also available back to you, right? So how we can share it back, what that mechanism will look like. We don't know yet, but that's one of our goals. So it's like it will be housed at PSU, but we don't own the data. It's your data. And so you should always be able to have access to it as well. If you wanted to do your own analyses, right? Or if you wanted to download it and use it for your internal purposes.
I wasn't here for the breakout sessions, but I just wanted to add two things. So one of the questions on the parent outcome tool, it said like, I feel confident in my own parenting abilities. And I think for questions like that, it would be helpful to have fluid language in there. So like, I mostly feel comfortable or often I feel comfortable, things like that. And I just wanted to echo, I want to say it right, Mr. Guevara, I don't want to say it wrong, sorry. But he said that, you know, for their communities, they like to write in narrative form. And I know at SEI, that's a big way that we share information too, is through story and like telling our stories to one another. So I just wanted to echo that I think that would be a nice feature to the assessment or the tool.
Flor?
Yeah, hi. I'm not sure if it was discussed, but for the questionnaire, will we be editing it based on program? Because in our group, we talked about how for some of the questions, having like a little thumbs up, thumbs down might be helpful for families. And I was just wondering, will we have different versions of these questionnaires that are specific to our program, or will we have the ability to kind of add like, for example, more open-ended questions to the narrative part? So yeah, like more, will we edit or will y'all have different versions that we can pick from, or
right?
So that kind of opens it up.
Yes, the intention is for you to be able to make it particular to your program. while trying to keep most of the meaning across the questions so that we can still compare the data and combine it at the end for the report. So something like replacing a response scale. So instead of having like the emojis, just having a thumbs up or a thumbs down, that's an example of something that we'd probably want to talk about together to figure out a solution to that. And I'm just saying this off the top of my head because from a data analysis perspective, it can be challenging to just have a question that only has 2 possible answers, then trying to compare that or combine it with data from other programs that actually have 5 possible. So there's just going to be a lot of details like that to sort of figure out. But definitely the intention and the spirit of the whole approach is to work with each one of you to make the tools the best fit possible, right, for your communities. I don't know if that's
Yeah, that was
okay.
helpful. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Sure.
Lorelai, I have a question. So for the pictures that you're using, you're gonna have the picture on for every question so that if we work with the families, they can just circle after we explain to them what the question is asking? Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yep.
All right, any other comments, feedback? And if you're in the shower and you happen to think about the equity fund and realize, you know what, I should have said this to Lorelai, know that you can always reach out to me, to Lorelai, to Alexis, I can relay the information over or whatever it is. Okay. And so.
Well, and Kimberly, this would be a perfect time for me to share my last slide. Because we tried to set up a process, right, for folks and a place moving forward where you can continue to offer this kind of feedback and in fact, just make direct edits to the tools that you would suggest. So let me share that. So this is the next steps. What we have done on our Google Drive at PSU is actually set up a folder for each ESEF grantee organization. And we put copies in both English and Spanish of both of these draft tools so that you and anybody else in your organization can go in there, review the tools, make suggested edits, make comments, do whatever you want with it, right? And we'll be able to see that in real time. We can just go into your Google folder and see, oh, okay, great. They've been working on this. These are some changes folks would like to see. These are some additions. These are thoughts that folks have about when they might use the tool, how they might use it. You could put questions in there that we can also respond to in real time. So we're doing this to try to make it as convenient as possible to offer this kind of feedback. Also, if that isn't something that really appeals to you or works for you, both Alexis and I are more than happy to have a conversation with anybody all the time. We're lonely researchers, call us, right? We're really happy to talk. Friendly people, do it. We don't want to spend our whole lives, in spreadsheets. So really open to whatever makes sense for you. And it could be just, sending us an email or we'd be happy, like we've already done a bit of this. If you have a group of folks in your organization who'd like to kind of come together and offer feedback, we're happy to host a kind of meeting, conversation, whatever you want to call it, like that, if that is a good way for your organization to offer the feedback. So really the theme here is like, however you want to tell us, we are so ready to hear it. And what we're going to do after this meeting is email out to each one of you the link to that Google Doc and a reminder, right, of here's here's what the process is, and here's how you can contact us. And then we will likely be following up with each one of you. Not all the time, I promise we won't bug you, but maybe once a month or so to just say, hey, if we haven't heard from you, no one is required to provide feedback, but we might just invite you again, because we really are trying to hear from as many folks as possible, because we know that it will just make this whole thing much more meaningful, right, for everybody. Most especially right for the families and communities. So that's our very next step. Then just giving you an idea of what are we doing between now and next September. For the next 4 months, we will continue revising and working on these parent-family tools as this feedback rolls in. Then January through March, we're actually going to take the tools out into the field with a couple of organizations and try them out. Try them out with families, try them out with staff, and get that real world feedback from families and staff about how the tools are working or not working, so that we can continue making changes all throughout the spring. And then April and May, the idea is to revise and finalize the tools. Finalize is like a little bit of a loose word. It's like finalize for now, because the idea is that we will continue as we start to use these tools with actual programs to keep getting that feedback, right? It's like for the first year, we could use the tools however they end up being in August. And then maybe we learn in the first year that no, there are more changes that need to be made. So for the second year of the evaluation, we make those changes. So the idea again is to try and keep this as flexible and responsive over time. So that's our kind of long range, bigger picture vision for how we'll continue to hopefully make these tools better and better. June and August, we have set aside for, just as I was saying, working with each one of you to really start thinking about setting up those systems and structures for the actual data collection. And then as of right now, we are envisioning data collection beginning in September of 2023. So basically 1 year from now. So let me stop sharing and see if there are any questions about that. Oh, and we're at time, so not expecting anyone to go over, but I am available if anyone has questions.
All right, so some quick reminders. I was going to go over the grant manual for a little snippet, but I realized, you know what, you're about to get the grant manual very soon. So let this be your update now. So just some updates. Let me share my screen real quick. The usual, you all might have met Pooja. Some of you haven't, some of you are new, but Pooja came in and introduced herself, and she works very closely with the Equity Collaborative. And so she will be reaching out for a conversation to talk about facilities, and so just know that it's an optional, conversation that you can choose to have. It's her trying to get information on what's needed for the Equity Fund grantees. Like, is facilities an issue? Is it needed? What's going on? And so she will be reaching out via email to you all. So just give you a heads up that it's a virtual meeting and it's optional. You don't have to attend, but it'd be great to hear if there's anything in regards to facilities that should be on her radar. Grant agreement status. Good news is you will be getting them very soon. I heard as soon as the end of this week. Knowing for me, that means could be next week, early next week as well. And so heads up, please be on the lookout in the emails for grant agreements that'll be coming out. The grant manual will be connected to that. So please take a look at your grant manual. I will actually go in depth with the grant manual next time and or a different session, just because there's sections that I really want to cover with you all, like the expenditure area chart and things like that, because Adina and I have gotten a lot of questions on what can we use funding on, can we or not, and in the grant manual it's listed in there what's an expenditure that you can use or not. Grant agreement, updated budget within 30 days. Obviously you will understand and see what you are rewarded. If you have to move things around your budget, that is your time to make the updated budgets. And then as always, monthly reports are due tomorrow for August. Program service delivery calendar as well. Please access yours. You can make the changes immediately in there or email it to me. And then if you have new staff that you'd like for them to attend the orientation, I have around like 4 or 7 every single time. And so the next one is October 17th. So let me know if there's any staff, shoot me an email and say, Kimberly, please add this staff onto the Equity Fund new staff orientation. Then I'll send them the invite. Okay. Let's see. I think that's it. Let's see. Let me stop sharing. And so that'll be all. Any questions, anything like that in regards to any updates that I just talked about? We have interviews for Adina's position tomorrow. Very excited. Hopefully we could find a candidate within that pool. So big shoes that this person has to fill, but very excited. And so hopefully we'll have good news on that soon.
I had a quick question on the calendar.
Yep.
Do we just have to have up through December, or do you want the
Yes.
whole year? Okay.
Up to
Perfect.
December, up to December. If you want to do the whole year, completely fine. Just know it's a living document. You can go back and change it. If goals were not met and you want to change it up again, completely doable and fine.
Okay.
See. Any other
I just
questions?
want to thank everybody. This was, sorry, Kimberly, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for spending so much time with this and all the really valuable feedback. And we look forward to continuing the conversation over the next couple months here.
Mhm. All right, thank you everyone for attending. As always, shoot me an email if you need anything.
Hey, Lorelai, you got a second for me to ask you a question about the tool?
You bet.